Oh, hey guys, welcome. Hey, here's a question for you. Are you the type of person that puts one piece of tape down the back of your back issue? Do you put two pieces of tape, or do you put the one long ways? I've always wondered what there was more of out there, or are you even just one of those people who tucks the plastic in and leaves it like that? I don't know. These days, I just kind of throw them in boxes. I don't even bag them board most of the time, unless they're going on the Wall of Fame back here, but let's go ahead and get into our reviews for this week, and let's start with DC like we usually do. And let's take a look here at Batman and Robin number 3. Now, Grant Morrison has this great way of layering different aspects of characters on top of each other, and now that we're into the 3rd issue of this run with the new Batman and the new Robin, we're really getting a great idea of who these characters are and how they're going to be interacting. And he's not only doing this with his heroes, but his villains as well. Mr. Pig is one of the funniest oddball type characters out there. He's a guy who does a disco strip tease in the middle of his monologue, and yet at the same time he's one of the most vicious and ruthless psychopaths you'll find in the DC universe. So he's really doing a great job of bringing out different aspects of characters over time, and of course he leaves us at the end of this issue with a cliffhanger that has the fanboy in me screeching like a 12-year-old girl on her first trip to Paris. Now, moving on to Green Lantern 45, this is your Blackest Night tie-in for this week, and I have to say that I've kind of forgotten how Green Lantern treats Blackest Night differently than the rest of the books. Books like Blackest Night Superman, Blackest Night Batman, even Blackest Night itself really treats this as a horror movie event. This is your summer horror movie. And yet, Green Lantern treats this more the same way Green Lantern Corps does, which is a space battle. This is your more Star Trek themed book. This is your factions going to war. And even though it's different from the other Blackest Night books that DC is putting out there, it still feels like it's the same story. It's amazing how Jeff Johns has been able to put all these different pieces together, and even though they're so different from each other, they still feel like they belong. And that's important. Hopping over to Marvel now, we're going to take a look at Nova 28. Now, Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning have been known for the great work they're doing in all these outer space books over in Marvel, and they're going to be taking a little tighter rein with a lot of those books, but Nova, for me, has always been my favorite. Since issue 1, they've done a great job of keeping the book on track despite all the crossovers they get thrown into. Things like Annihilation, War of Kings. Again and again, they get pulled off into these side stories, and yet they're able to maintain the focus of their book. And Nova Prime is, quite frankly, one of my favorite characters now in the Marvel Universe. And the way he's able to take on a character like Blastar in this issue, now calling himself King Blastar, it just brings to my mind some of the great stuff that has come from similar type books like Green Lantern and even some of the better Star Trek movies and TV episodes. So really, Nova 28, even though it evokes all these great other stories and all these great other things in pop culture, it's really doing a good job of telling its own story despite being pulled into all these crossovers. Don't let all those crossover banners on the cover trick you into thinking that this is a book you want to avoid. This is a book you want to read at all costs. Deadpool 14. Okay, now there's a time when Deadpool was a vicious, maniacal, twisted psychopath who killed with no remorse and basically lived on the edge of sanity. Now he's a cornball. He's a screw-up. To be honest, Deadpool 14 had me laughing out loud at a couple times, even though the storyline that they're currently doing with him running his own pirate ship. He has Bob, the Hydra agent, dressed as a giant parrot. He's got a blind girl piloting his pirate ship. Despite all of that stuff, I still love it. And even though this is a pretty good departure from the way a lot of the other writers have dealt with Deadpool. And even guys who have treated him as a silly guy spewing out one-liners didn't get as madcap and zany as this book gets. I still love it, and it's still worth a read. 28 Days Later, #1. Now, a lot of movie tie-in books kind of have this problem where a movie comes out, they start writing the story that's the sequel, and then the next movie comes out and wipes out everything they've done in the comic book series. But here, 28 Days Later had its sequel 28 weeks later, and this comic series is going to bridge the gap between the two. You get a familiar character from the movie returning in order to tell this story of what leads into the events of the second movie. And it's really quite fascinating to see how they're tackling this. Now, there are points where it breaks down into your basic story where she gets introduced to this new group of characters, and you've got the guy who's the jerk, and you got the guy who's the know-it-all, and you got the guy who seems really nice, and there's the guy who seems really slick but doesn't really have a clue. A lot of cliched characters, and yet at the same time I really found myself caring what was going to happen in this book. I thought the artwork was great. It really fit the look, especially the first film, and it really was fun to revisit that universe and get a glimpse at the widening story out there. Now, moving to another type of horror from Antarctic Press, we get Bad Kids Go to Hell #3. Now, if you haven't been reading Bad Kids Go to Hell, I really urge you to do whatever you can to get copies of issue 1, issue 2, and now issue 3, and of course 4 comes next month. This is another take on that classic horror movie idea. Bunch of teenagers in a bad situation and they're getting plucked off one by one. And yet it's treated like those great straight-to-video movies that you used to watch when you were younger. Movies like the original April Fool's Day, or even some of the later Nightmare on Elm Streets, or the Halloweens, or the Friday the 13th, that don't take themselves really all that seriously, and yet have this fun story going on. Bad Kids Go to Hell is a group of kids who are stuck in Saturday detention, much like the Breakfast Club, and they find themselves being stalked by this demon who's haunting their school library. Now, it sounds kind of silly, but there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of gore, there's some foul language. Everything you would hope to find in a cheesy horror movie, you're going to find in this comic book. And I can't recommend it highly enough. That's going to wrap it up for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed taking a look at some of these comics. If there's a book you want to talk about, just let me know. You can drop me an email, stop by our website at vglosers.com, join our forum, or if you want to, post your own video response, and maybe we'll get a dialogue going. But thanks, guys, for checking out this video, and I'll talk to you later. I don't think I'm ever going to get this figured out, though.